I reside in a private canal community in Florida with my family, and I prefer not to disclose the exact location for privacy reasons. Our home is conveniently situated just a 15-minute boat ride away from the canal's opening into the vast ocean. Within our waterside haven, we own a couple of jet skis and a 35-foot 2007 Proline Express boat, my dad's prized possession and his domain. Our household consists of 4 members: my mom, dad, sister, and myself. I'm currently 23 years old, while my sister is 26. Please understand that my intention is not to boast, but merely to provide context for our story. We have several properties across the country, including one in California, one in New York, and our primary residence, our cherished Florida house. My sister and I grew up here, attended school, and formed countless memories. Our neighborhood is gated, and our parents often travel out of state, leaving my sister and me with our faithful canine companion in charge of the house. Our residence is quite splendid, and when we find ourselves home alone, we sometimes host gatherings and parties in the backyard. Our house enjoys the privilege of being the last one along the canal, and on one side, it is bordered by a serene marsh. The canal stretches a little beyond our home before meandering into the marsh, ensuring complete privacy in one direction, free from prying neighbors' eyes. On a particularly scorching day, my sister and I decided to embark on an adventure with our jet skis. As previously mentioned, it's a short 15-minute journey from our canal to the open bay, where we'd often cruise beneath the bridge or venture out into the ocean, weather permitting. However, the ocean could sometimes be too turbulent, so we'd usually stay in the bay, depending on the tide. The bay was often populated with various boats, and after some time spent zipping around, we decided to pause in the middle of the bay to unwind. Within minutes, a medium-sized boat approached us, captained by an older man in his late 50s or early 60s, with a slightly portly physique and a beer in hand, which seemed an odd choice for someone steering a vessel. He initiated conversation by inquiring about our jet skis and regaling us with tales of his own watercraft and his spacious waterfront abode. In a somewhat uncomfortable turn, he invited us to swim in his pool, an offer we politely declined, citing our impending return home. He pressed on, inquiring about our origins, and we provided vague answers, stating that we were from the general area. My sister took the initiative to start her jet ski's engine, signaling our departure. With friendly waves and a sense of relief, we made our escape from his boat. We had encountered our fair share of unwelcome attention before, and this encounter, although mildly unsettling, did not stand out as extraordinary. Shortly thereafter, we decided to call it a day and began our journey back, idling our jet skis through the canal. When we reached the point where our canal intersected with another, resembling a T-junction, we found ourselves within the bounds of our own canal. That's when we noticed the same boat not far behind us, drifting lazily in the intersecting canal, which we had just passed. Uncertain whether he had followed us or resided in that intersecting canal, we continued homeward and docked our jet skis. What happened next veered into the realm of the bizarre. As we washed our jet skis, the man's boat slowly approached our residence in the canal. He positioned his boat right in front of our dock and initiated conversation again, donning that unsettling smile of his. He showered compliments on our house and backyard, and my sister, not one to mince words, boldly asked him why he had followed us home, expressing her discomfort. In response, he claimed to be a fellow resident of our community and merely wanted to check out our canal. Sensing our unease, he pivoted his boat within the marshy area and bid us goodbye with a wave. We refrained from acknowledging his departure. Some situations warrant abandoning the pretense of friendliness. Worried about the unsettling encounter, we contacted our dad and relayed the peculiar events. He was understandably displeased with us for failing to record the man's boat registration, something neither of us had considered in the heat of the moment. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of our ordeal. Later that night, our dog's persistent barking awakened both my sister and me. We rushed to our windows and saw a large figure sprinting across our yard toward the dock before disappearing into the water. I quickly opened my window, but there was nothing to be seen. Hastening downstairs with the lights on, we confirmed that the intruder had vanished. Although we couldn't be certain, it seemed likely that the person was the same creepy man who had followed us earlier. Our relief lay in the presence of our formidable canine protector, as it's possible that his menacing intentions extended further. We inquired with our canal neighbors, but none possessed security cameras that could have captured the earlier boat incident or any suspicious activity during the late hours. In our gated community, backyard surveillance wasn't a common practice. Now, every time we set out on our boat or jet skis, a shadow of apprehension looms, and we remain vigilant for any sign of that unsettling man and his boat. During the summer, my friend Kyle becomes the go-to guy for boat days because he owns a 27-footer center console boat. None of our other friends have a boat, so he's our go-to captain. While I'm far from a boat expert, Kyle's vessel is equipped with some radar system that alerts us to any land masses, shallow waters, or nearby boats, allowing us to enjoy boating even after the sun goes down. The boat comfortably accommodates 8 people. One scorching mid-July day, Kyle took 5 of us out on the bay just to enjoy some drinks on the water. Several hours later, he navigated us to a waterfront bar and restaurant where we docked the boat and indulged in food and more drinks, relaxing for a few extra hours. We had an abundance of spiked seltzers in the cooler, and it being a Friday night, we were in high spirits. After leaving the restaurant, Kyle guided us back to the middle of the lagoon with music blaring. Kyle doesn't really drink, so he's the perfect captain to ferry us around. As we cruised by the lighthouse on the barrier island, we got into a conversation about how eerie lighthouses can be at night. Suddenly, Kyle cut the engine, and we just floated there, the music still playing, as we engaged in conversation. My attention was fixated on the lighthouse, and I found myself repeatedly gazing at it, drawn away from the ongoing conversation. It was during this momentary distraction that I heard a distant scream. I urgently said, "Hey, cut the music," multiple times until whoever was in control of the music paused it. I heard a scream from the distance, I announced. We were currently floating next to an island situated between the mainland and the barrier islands. A tense silence enveloped us for a few seconds as we all swayed on the water. Sure enough, the woman's scream for help echoed from that island. We exchanged alarmed glances, for we were too far from both the mainland and the barrier island for it to be coming from either of those directions. We yelled back as loudly as we could, and the woman's voice responded with another plea for help. With difficulty, we continued this back and forth communication, barely hearing each other. Finally, we asked, "Are you on the island?" And she screamed back, "Yes." Kyle immediately started the engine and headed toward the island. Once we were close enough to the shore, he dropped anchor, and all 6 of us disembarked, frantically searching and calling for the woman. The situation became even more alarming when she cried out, "I'm being followed." Despite the island's relatively small size, our group, armed with flashlights, scoured every inch, but we found no trace of her on the opposite side. Then, we all heard a spine-chilling scream, somewhat muffled, echoing in the darkness. We urgently shouted to meet on that side of the island and sprinted as fast as we could, even running through painful brush barefoot. By the time I reached the other side, my feet were bleeding, but there was no sign of the woman. My friends Kyle and Jake were already there, and they mentioned hearing the sound of a boat motor fading into the distance. There was a fresh wake in the water, clearly left by a boat that had just departed, but the darkness prevented us from seeing further into the water. I called 911 and reported the incident so that Bay Patrol could be alerted to any mysterious boats with their lights off. A Bay Patrol boat arrived at Kyle's vessel, and we explained the harrowing experience to the 2 officers on board. They immediately contacted all other boats on duty, initiating a manhunt. However, the boat in question was never found, and it never made it to the news. To this day, we remain bewildered by the incident. There were no news articles about missing women, leaving us with numerous unanswered questions. Was it a potential kidnapping, or perhaps a group playing a sinister prank? We may never uncover the truth behind that eerie night. This is a tale that has been recounted endlessly by my uncle and dad during our family gatherings, and it never fails to send shivers down our spines. It was the 1980s, a time when my dad and Uncle Jack were fervent fishermen, always venturing into the deep sea several times a year aboard my uncle's impressive 70s two-cabin cruiser. I've seen photos, and that vessel was a behemoth. My uncle used to reside in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where he docked his boat. Occasionally, my dad would join him for a weekend escapade out to sea. Personally, fishing never captivated me. My dad tried to spark my interest, but it simply wasn't my cup of tea. I won't feign expertise in angling, but I do know that the further you venture into the ocean, the larger and more plentiful the catches become. They primarily pursue striped bass, tuna, and cod, cruising about 20 miles offshore, hauling in whatever they could fit on their boat. Their obsession was such that to this day, nearly 90% of the walls in my uncle's house are adorned with photographs of him and my dad proudly displaying their prized catches. However, one particular night, the setting was unexpectedly eerie. It was a moonless, overcast evening when things took a bizarre turn. They were inside the cabin, enjoying a beer and playing cards after dinner when an issue with the boat caused the lights to flicker and die. My Uncle Jack, armed with only a feeble flashlight, fumbled to check the circuit panel. In the pitch darkness, he discovered that 2 fuses had blown, conveniently plunging the boat into near-complete darkness, including the running lights. With no other option, they reluctantly decided to call it an early night and wait for dawn to make their way back to shore. About an hour later, an odd humming sound emanated from roughly 20 meters on the horizon. They ventured onto the deck of the boat, but the inky blackness outside made it nearly impossible to discern whether their eyes were open or shut. The mysterious humming didn't resemble any fish. Rather, it had an uncanny resemblance to a person groaning. Even with their flashlight, their visibility extended only about 5 meters ahead. As rain began to fall, they retreated inside the cabin, realizing it would be reckless to navigate the boat in the dark and rain, so they decided to turn in for the night. At the break of dawn, Uncle Jack roused my dad, urging him to join him on the deck. Through the dense fog, they spotted another vessel floating nearby. Uncle Jack steered their boat closer and sounded a whistle in an attempt to attract attention from anyone who might be on board. However, the vessel appeared deserted. Securing a rope between the 2 boats, Uncle Jack leaped onto the mysterious vessel. The cabin door was unlocked, and he cautiously descended into the cabin. A pungent, nauseating odor assailed his senses as he discovered a man suspended by a rope inside. He hurriedly retreated, rushing back to his own boat, where he retched into the water. My dad recounted that he couldn't bring himself to venture below deck after his brother described what he had witnessed. My dad and Uncle Jack marked their current coordinates and contacted the nearest Coast Guard station via VHF radio. Within an hour, the Coast Guard arrived, and only then did my dad and Uncle Jack head back to shore. To this day, the enigmatic humming sound remains a mystery. This story continues to haunt my uncle the most, as he's the one who actually encountered the deceased individual. Together, they hold the eeriest fishing story I've ever heard.